Whispers of the Destroyers. The galaxy was full of stories. Some were stories of glory, others of failure. But all had a single purpose: to warn. Among these stories, one whispered tale spread quietly between stations and colonies. It was the tale of humanity's secret war machines, the Sovereign-Class Destroyers. Most aliens laughed at it. They said humans were too young, too fragile, too small to build something that could rival entire fleets. To them, Earth was just another planet, a noisy species struggling to prove itself. But the whispers never stopped, and sometimes even the bravest captains lowered their voices when they spoke of it. On a distant outpost near the Veil Nebula, a group of alien traders gathered in a cantina. The air was thick with smoke, and the walls carried the hum of low music. One trader, his scales shining under the lights, leaned forward. "They say the humans built ships bigger than moons," he whispered, his voice trembling. Another laughed, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Fairy tales. Nothing more. Humans can barely keep their colonies safe." But the first trader shook his head. "I heard from a friend who saw the sky above Sol. He said there was something massive." The words hung heavy in the air. Even those who mocked felt a strange chill, because deep inside, none of them could be sure. The galaxy was vast, and humans had always been unpredictable. Far from the outpost, on Earth itself, the truth was locked away, beneath the oceans, in secret shipyards carved into the crust of the planet. The Sovereign-Class Destroyers slept. Colossal machines built not in pride, but in silence. Each hull stretched longer than cities, their armor dark as night, their cores pulsing with hidden power. They were not ships meant to explore, they were not ships meant to impress, they were ships meant for one purpose: war. The engineers who worked on them lived their entire lives without speaking a word outside the shipyards. Generations trained to keep the secret. Children raised under false names, families hidden away. They knew the galaxy would never forgive humanity if the truth came out too early. So they waited, building, hiding, preparing. The galaxy thought humanity was still weak. They thought humans were still learning, still crawling. But in truth, humanity was watching. Every war, every betrayal, every empire that rose and fell was studied carefully. Humans learned patience, and in the shadows, they forged their answer to the stars. Back in the cantina, the traders argued. One slammed his fist on the table, shaking the glasses. "If these destroyers exist, where are they? Why have we never seen them?" The room grew quiet, and the oldest among them finally spoke, his voice gravelly with age. "You don't see them because you're not meant to. You'll see them only when it is too late." At that moment, across the galaxy, signals stirred within the hidden command centers of Earth. Orders were being prepared. Codes that had not been used in centuries were unlocked. The sleeping giants beneath the oceans hummed softly, their systems testing, their weapons whispering for release. For the first time in 100 years, a single, Sovereign-Class Destroyer shifted in its berth. The movement was small, almost nothing, but it was enough to send ripples through the water above. Fishermen in nearby seas looked up in confusion as their boats rocked with no wind. They would never know that below them, the power of a sun was waiting to rise in orbit above Earth. Civilian stations carried on with normal life, families, traders, tourists, all unaware of what lay hidden below their feet. But among the fleet, commanders of Earth, the whispers were not jokes, they were warnings. Admirals stood in silence as reports came in. The galaxy was shifting. The enemy was moving. The time for hiding might soon be over. In a dark chamber, lit only by the glow of tactical maps, the High Admiral of Earth spoke quietly. "For centuries we kept our blades sheathed," he said. "But the galaxy is growing careless. They believe we are weak. They believe we are myths. Perhaps it is time we remind them of the truth." His officers nodded, their faces pale. They had trained for this moment, but none had truly believed it would come. Now the Sovereign-Class Destroyers were no longer whispers. They were awakening, and in the stars, unseen by most, a new warlord was rising. His fleets moved like locusts, devouring system after system. The alien coalition begged for help, but they mocked humanity even as they asked. They did not know that their salvation, or their destruction, was already being prepared, because humanity's answer was coming. The Sovereign-Class Destroyers would rise, and the galaxy would never be the same again. A broken alliance. The galaxy was shaking. Across the border systems, fleets clashed, empires trembled, and planets burned. The new warlord who had risen from the outer rim swept through colonies like fire through dry grass. World after world fell, their defenses crushed, their leaders silenced. The alien coalition that once claimed unity now scrambled in fear. They called for help, but their voices carried panic instead of strength. The coalition had always looked down on humanity. Humans were considered a young species, a race not ready for true power. In the great council chambers, humans were given a seat but never respect. They were told to listen, to learn, to follow. Now, as the warlords' fleets moved closer to their own core systems, those same leaders whispered the same name they had mocked for centuries: Earth, Honor. The homeworld of the coalition, in a chamber of tall spires and glowing lights, the leaders argued. "We must ask the humans to send ships," one shouted, his long fingers slamming against the table. Another hissed in reply, "Humans? They are weak. Their fleets are small, their weapons primitive. What can they possibly do against this threat?" But the truth was undeniable. The coalition's fleets were falling apart. Their ships were no match for the enemy's brutal tactics. Reluctantly, they sent envoys, messages racing across the stars. "Earth, we request your aid. We request your fleets. We request your sacrifice." On Earth, the message was received. In the war halls beneath the surface, the High Admiral read the words in silence. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with fire. For centuries, humanity had listened to their insults, had been treated as nothing but dust beneath the feet of the old empires. Now they begged for help, and humanity would answer, but not with what they expected. The command went out, across hidden bases, across the deep oceans, across the ice-covered moons. The same signal was received. The Sovereign-Class Destroyers stirred again, their massive engines humming like thunder. Dock crews watched with awe as the Titanic ship shifted, their armored hulls glowing with power. One by one, the great hangars opened, flooding the dark seas with light. For the first time in history, humanity's greatest weapons were leaving their slumber. In the Coalition Council, the envoys returned. But when asked what the humans had said, their answer chilled every heart in the chamber. They gave no words of promise, no numbers of ships, no conditions. They only said this: "Prepare your skies." The alien leaders sat in silence. "Prepare your skies." The words echoed like a storm. What did it mean? What were the humans planning? Meanwhile, on the borders of coalition space, defenders fought hopeless battles. One planet after another was lost, its skies filled with the burning wreckage of their fleets. The warlords' forces advanced without fear. Their ships were brutal, spiked with armor, armed with weapons that tore holes in entire cities from orbit. Refugees flooded through the stars, screaming for anyone to save them. And then, in the middle of the chaos, something new appeared. At first, it was only a shadow, a shape too large to be understood. Enemy scanners went wild. Coalition commanders froze as readings spiked beyond their limits. The shadow grew, blocking out the suns. Then the light caught it, revealing a massive black hull covered in glowing lines. A single Sovereign-Class destroyer had arrived. Coalition soldiers stared in disbelief. They had mocked the humans. They had laughed at their myths, but now the myth stood before them, real and alive. The destroyer's engines lit the void like a newborn star. Its weapons hummed with energy that no alien mind could understand. And in that moment, both the warlords' forces and the coalition defenders realized the same truth. The galaxy had never known fear until humanity chose to reveal its strength. Inside the command deck of the Sovereign Destroyer, the human admiral stood tall. He looked at the tactical screens, his voice steady. "Engage," he said, and the order spread through the ship. Weapons charged, shields blazed, and the Sovereign roared into battle. The first volley destroyed an entire enemy fleet group, not ship by ship, but dozens at once, wiped from the stars in a wave of fire. Coalition commanders gasped, their eyes wide. The humans had not sent fleets of small warships. They had sent gods of war. In the coalition chambers, news arrived like thunder. "The humans have sent a ship," the messenger cried. Relief and fear mixed across the council. If this was only one ship, how many more waited? And what price? Would the galaxy pay for doubting humanity for so long? Far away, deep in the oceans of Earth, more sovereign-class destroyers stirred, their massive forms breaking free of their hidden cages. The time of whispers was over. The time of revelation had begun. The first awakening. The galaxy had seen many wars, but it had never seen what was about to come. On the edge of coalition space, sensors screamed with warnings no one could understand. Fleets that once believed themselves untouchable now drifted, in fear, their crews staring at their screens as something vast appeared on their radars. The signature was impossible. The numbers too high, the scale beyond reason. It was not a fleet, it was not a battalion, it was something else entirely. The Sovereign-Class Destroyer broke through the void like a rising titan. Its hull was so large it seemed to eclipse the stars. The smooth black armor reflected the light of suns as if it swallowed them whole. Across its surface, glowing veins of blue pulsed with life, carrying energy from a core more powerful than anything the galaxy had ever seen. The coalition fleets fell silent on the comms. Even the warlords' commanders hesitated. This was no rumor, no whisper. This was real. And it was here. Inside the ship, thousands of crew members moved with precision. Every soldier, every officer, every engineer had trained their entire lives for this moment. They had lived in secrecy, serving aboard ships that no one in the galaxy believed existed. Now, as the destroyer's systems awakened, their hands flew over controls, activating weapons that had been waiting for centuries. The captain stood at the command deck, his eyes fixed on the enemy formations. All systems green. His officer reported. The captain gave a single nod, his voice calm. "Show them what humanity has kept hidden." The first awakening was not just the ship's engines. It was the awakening of fear. The warlord's fleet had been advancing without hesitation, but now their lines faltered. Even the most hardened soldiers could feel the weight pressing against their minds. It was as if the void itself had grown teeth. The destroyer fired. It was not like the coalition's weapons, weak beams or scattered missiles. It was a storm, pure energy condensed into a lance of fire that cut through the darkness. The first shot tore across space, and with it, dozens of enemy cruisers vanished, broken into burning debris in an instant. Coalition commanders gasped, their jaws open in disbelief. One ship, only one, had destroyed more enemies in seconds than entire. Fleets had in weeks. In the council chambers, news poured in through panicked transmissions. The humans have unleashed something, a trembling officer said through the comms. Screens showed images of the Sovereign-Class Destroyer, its shadow cast over burning battlefields. Leaders who once mocked humanity now gripped their seats in silence. No one dared to speak, for they all knew the same truth. If one ship could do this, the galaxy was no longer in their hands. On the battlefield, the destroyer's second volley thundered across the void. Enemy battleships tried to regroup, their commanders screaming orders, but it was useless. The human vessel tore through their defenses like paper. Every blast, every strike was precise, unstoppable, and merciless. The warlord himself watched from the bridge of his massive flagship, his face twisted in disbelief. This cannot be human," he muttered. But deep inside, even he knew, the era of underestimating Earth was over. Back on Earth, deep beneath the oceans, more awakenings began. Other sovereign-class destroyers stirred from their long sleep, their engines lighting up the seas with eerie blue glow. Entire seas trembled, waves crashing against coasts as if the planet itself was shivering. For centuries they had waited, and now the order had come. One destroyer had been enough to send fear into the galaxy, but soon there would be many. The coalition fleets that had begged humanity for help sent urgent messages. "Stay with us, protect us, we cannot hold without you," they cried. But the human admiral's voice was cold, carried through the comms like iron. "We did not build these ships for your politics. We built them for survival. Stand aside or be swept away." The words hit harder than any weapon. The coalition realized that humanity was not their servant, not their junior partner. Humanity was now the power that could decide the galaxy's fate. The Sovereign Destroyer moved forward again, silent, unstoppable. Every alien eye in the sector was fixed on it. Some saw salvation, others saw doom, but none could deny its existence. It was no longer a whisper. It was no longer a story told in cantinas and laughed at by traitors. It was the truth, and it had awakened. And as the wreckage of enemy fleets burned across the stars, one question spread across every world. If this is only the first awakening, what will happen when the rest of them rise? Fire in the stars, the battlefield stretched across the void, wreckage drifted silently, glowing with dying fire, the remains of fleets that had believed themselves strong. The warlords' forces pressed deeper into coalition space, but their advance had slowed, not because of resistance from the coalition, but because of a single human ship. The Sovereign-Class Destroyer waited in the dark, its presence heavy like a storm before it breaks. The warlord's fleet was vast, rows upon rows of cruisers, destroyers, and carriers stretched across the system, blotting out the stars. Their engines burned red, their weapons charged, their commanders shouted orders filled with rage. They thought sheer numbers would crush the human vessel, but numbers meant nothing against what was coming. Inside the Sovereign Destroyer, the crew worked in silence. Screens glowed with enemy formations, targeting data scrolled endlessly. The captain stood calm, one hand resting on the console. "All batteries ready," the weapons officer said, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. The captain nodded once. "Then we begin." The first strike was like a sunrise in the void. Lances of energy burst from the destroyer's sides, cutting through space with deadly precision. Entire squadrons of enemy ships simply vanished, consumed in a storm of fire. Coalition fleets watching from afar gasped, their voices trembling over the comms. They had begged humanity for help, but even they had not expected this. The warlord roared in fury, slamming his fist against the arm of his throne. "Press forward, surround it, tear it apart," he shouted. His ships obeyed, surging forward in a wave of red light, dozens then hundreds charging at the lone human vessel. But the Sovereign Destroyer was not afraid. Its shields flared, glowing like burning suns as the enemy fire struck. The hull trembled, but the destroyer held strong. Then it answered. Missiles the size of buildings erupted from hidden bays, streaking across the void. They weaved between enemy fire with perfect precision before detonating into stars of destruction. Entire carriers broke apart, their crews lost in seconds. The warlord's fleet screamed across comms, their cries filled with terror. This was no ordinary ship. This was death itself. Forged in human hands, coalition commanders who once doubted humanity now watched with wide eyes. Some felt hope. Others felt fear. But all knew the balance of power was shifting. If humanity had such ships hidden in the dark, then the galaxy would never be the same. The destroyer kept moving, each volley carving deep scars into the enemy lines. It was not a battle. It was a slaughter. The warlords' ships broke formation, some retreating in panic, others charging forward in desperation. But the Sovereign's weapons were relentless. Beams of pure energy split battleships in half. Railguns hurled slugs that ripped through armor like paper, and the void itself seemed to tremble with every strike. Inside the warlord's flagship, his officers stared in silence. One finally whispered, "It fights like an entire fleet." Another shook his head. "No, it fights like a god," the warlord growled, his voice low with fury. "Then we will show these humans that even gods can bleed." The enemy launched their superweapon, a massive ion spear designed to cripple entire armadas. The beam surged, across the stars, striking the Sovereign Destroyer with blinding light. For a moment, silence fell. Coalition fleets held their breath. Enemy soldiers cheered. The warlord leaned forward with a cruel smile. But when the light faded, the Sovereign still stood. Its shields shimmered, cracked, but unbroken. And then it returned fire, a single broadside. From the destroyer shattered the warlord's weapon platform. The explosion burned brighter than a sun, lighting up the system with fire. The cheering stopped, replaced by silence. The coalition whispered in awe. The enemy screamed in fear, and the warlord clenched his fists until his claws bled. The captain of the Sovereign spoke calmly into the comms, his words echoing across the system. "This is the first, and it is enough." The message spread like wildfire. Every fleet, every commander, every civilian who heard it understood. This was only one ship, one of many, and it was enough to change everything in the Scias. Oceans of Earth, more hangars opened, more sovereign destroyers stirred, their cores glowing, their weapons awakening. The galaxy would soon learn that humanity had never been weak. They had only been waiting. The stars burned with fire, the wreckage of fleets scattered like ash, and in the silence that followed, one truth echoed across the galaxy. The age of underestimating humans was over. The Sovereign-Class Destroyers had risen, and the stars themselves trembled. The Emperor's warning. The warlord's fleet was broken. Wreckage drifted across the stars, glowing embers of what had once been an unstoppable armada. The Sovereign-Class Destroyer moved silently through the aftermath, its engines humming like the growl of a predator that had not yet finished the hunt. Across the comms, voices cried out, coalition commanders begging for help, enemy captains pleading for mercy, civilians whispering prayers. But the humans did not answer at once. They waited, letting the silence weigh heavier than any weapon in the command deck of the destroyer. The captain stood before a vast screen. On it, the galaxy watched, every channel, every frequency tuned to the human transmission. The message was not just for the coalition or the warlord, it was for everyone. From the richest empires to the smallest colonies, from smugglers to kings, all would hear what humanity had to say. The captain's voice was steady, cold and sharp, like a blade. "For centuries you mocked us, you dismissed us, you called us weak," he began. "You thought humanity was a minor species, one you could use, one you could command, one you could betray without consequence." The words carried across the void, translated into every alien tongue. You believed the whispers of the Sovereign-Class Destroyers were only myths, only stories to frighten children. The captain leaned forward, his eyes burning. "Now you have seen the truth." Across the galaxy, stations fell silent. Traders in cantinas froze mid-drink. Miners in deep tunnels turned to their radios. Rulers, in grand palaces, gripped the arms of their thrones. The voice of humanity filled them all with a single emotion, fear. The captain continued. "This ship is one of many. One blade among a fleet of giants, if one can end an armada. Imagine what happens when we release them all." The screen behind him flickered, showing shadows rising from Earth's oceans. The massive forms of other sovereign destroyers preparing for war. Gasps spread across the galaxy. The myths were not only true, they were multiplying. In the coalition council chambers, leaders sat pale and trembling. For centuries they had laughed at Earth, kept humans on the edge of their power. Now the balance was gone. A single human voice spoke louder than their entire assembly. The captain's words grew sharper. "You ask for our help now. You beg us to fight your battles, but hear this well. Humanity does not bleed for those who mocked us." Coalition delegates flinched, their faces twisting with shame and fear. "We built these ships for our survival. We built them for the day the galaxy turned against us. Not for your politics, not for your arrogance." The warlord listened from his broken flagship, rage in his chest. But even he could not deny the power of the words. His empire had crushed dozens of worlds, but in one battle, his fleets had been humiliated. He snarled, "Humans think they are gods," but his voice cracked with unease. The human captain gave one final warning. "This is not the full weight of our strength. This is only the beginning. Test us again, and we will not send one ship. We will send the fleet, and when the sovereign destroyers rise together, there will be no empires left to mock us, no fleets left to fight us, no stars left to hide you." He paused, letting the silence cut deeper than his words. "Remember this. We are not here to serve the galaxy. We are here to shape it." The transmission ended. The screen went dark. leaving only the glow of wreckage drifting in the void. But the words remained, carved into the hearts of every listener. The galaxy now knew the truth. Earth had not been waiting to join them. Earth had been preparing to rule them. Back on Earth, the High Admiral watched the report with cold eyes. He turned to his officers, his voice calm. The warning is given. Let us see who dares ignore it. Around him, holomaps of the galaxy shimmered with light, showing fleets, borders, and burning war zones. Already, messages poured in from across the stars, offers of alliance, surrender, or desperate bargaining. But humanity was in no rush. They had waited centuries. They could wait longer, in the coalitions. Grand Chamber. Silence hung like a blade. Finally, one elder whispered what none dared to say. If this is their warning, what will their judgment look like? The galaxy shivered. The Sovereign-Class Destroyers were no longer legends. They were the Emperor's voice, the Emperor's warning, and soon, perhaps, the Emperor's judgment. Shadows of fear spread faster than fire, across every star system. Whispers of the Sovereign-Class Destroyers filled the airwaves on distant colonies. Children huddled close as parents told them the story. Humans had built ships larger than cities, ships that could erase fleets in a single strike. Merchants in crowded spaceports lowered their voices when speaking the name of Earth. Even pirates. And smugglers, who feared no law, whispered in unease. The galaxy had changed overnight, and everyone knew it. In the grand chambers of the coalition, leaders gathered in secret, their faces pale, their voices sharp with panic. One slammed his fist against the table. We cannot allow humanity to control us. If these destroyers rise in numbers, they will decide the fate of us all. Another leaned forward, trembling. What choice do we have? Did you not see what a single one did? If they unleash 10, 20, 50, none of our fleets will survive. The arguments grew heated, some calling for alliance with humans, others calling for immediate plans to sabotage them. But deep inside, they all shared the same fear. Humanity was no longer beneath them. Humanity stood above them. On a desert world far from Earth, a shadow council of rival empires met in secret. They swore their meeting was hidden, safe from human eyes. But still, every word carried a trace of dread. They will turn those ships on us. Next, one whispered, today it is the warlord, tomorrow it will be us. Another hissed in reply, we must strike first before they reveal their full strength. Yet no one volunteered. No one dared to face humanity openly. Their fear was stronger than their hate. Meanwhile, on Earth, the shipyards grew louder. More Sovereign-Class Destroyers stirred in their hidden bays. The oceans boiled with energy as massive hangar doors cracked open. Engineers worked day and night, their eyes lit by the glow of reactors that could power entire continents. For centuries they had lived in silence, sworn never to speak of their work. Now they labored with pride, knowing their creations would soon rise into the stars. Coalition spies tried to learn the truth. They sent cloaked drones into the solar system, hoping to glimpse the scale of humanity's fleet, but none returned. The few that made it close enough transmitted only fragments. Massive shadows moving in the deep, weapons glowing like the hearts of stars. Then their signals went silent. One by one, the spies vanished, swallowed by Earth's defenses. The message was clear. Humans allowed no eyes to see what they were building. In cantinas, old traders shook their heads and muttered, the humans were patient, more patient than any of us, while we squabbled and fought for scraps. They built giants in silence. And others replied in hushed tones, if they were so patient, what are they waiting for now? The warlord, though wounded, was not finished. From his hidden strongholds, he rebuilt his forces, gathering allies who still hungered for conquest. But even his followers were uneasy. They remembered the way the Sovereign Destroyer had cut through fleets as if they were paper. Some whispered betrayal, some planned desertion. The warlord growled, his voice dripping with venom. Let them fear. Let them whisper. I will crush the humans and their machines. I will burn their homeworld until nothing remains. Yet even as he spoke, doubt gnawed at him. He had seen with his own eyes that humanity's power was no myth. And deep inside, he feared the next battle would not end in his favor. Back in the Coalition Council, another secret was revealed. Reports arrived of human fleets moving. Not just one destroyer, but many. Signals detected in multiple star systems. Movements too precise to be mistakes. The council froze. "How many are there?" one asked, his voice thin. The answer came like a dagger. "No one knows." The words filled the chamber with dread. For what enemy could you fight if you could not count their strength? In the shadows of every empire, fear turned into action. Saboteurs were trained, spies dispatched, whispers of alliances with the warlord began. Anything to stop humanity before it was too late. But for every plot, for every plan, there was always the same question whispered in fear. What if they already know? For humanity was listening, watching, waiting. The Sovereign-Class Destroyers were no longer sleeping giants. They were awake, they were rising, and the galaxy's fear only fed their silence. The humans did not need to strike every world. They needed only to remind the galaxy of what could happen. And so, across the stars, every species lived under the same shadow, the shadow of the Sovereign Destroyers, unseen, untouchable, unstoppable. And in that shadow, the galaxy trembled. Humanity's answer to the stars. The galaxy held its breath. From the richest empires to the poorest colonies, every world watched the skies. They had heard the warning. They had seen the first battles. They had felt the fear. But no one yet knew the full truth. No one knew how many Sovereign-Class Destroyers slept beneath the oceans of Earth. No one knew how far humanity was willing to go. In the deep command chambers of Earth, the High Admiral stood before his council. On the wall behind him, holograms of the galaxy burned, red markers showing warlord fleets, yellow signals marking coalition strongholds, blue lines tracking trade and migration. The Admiral raised his hand, and all fell silent. "It is time," he said, his voice calm but heavy. "For centuries we endured their insults, their arrogance, their chains. Now they will learn humanity does not bow." The order went out. Across the seas, mountains trembled, oceans boiled, and ice cracked. Hidden hangars opened one by one, revealing titans long asleep. The Sovereign-Class Destroyers rose from the deep, their engines igniting like suns. Water cascaded off their colossal hulls. Waves crashed against coasts. Storms howled as the sky split with light. In every ocean, in every hidden bay, the giants ascended. The fleet of myths had become real. Billions watched the broadcasts. On alien worlds, crowds gathered around public screens, staring in disbelief as images appeared. Sovereign, after sovereign, black hulls gleaming. Weapons glowing, engines roaring. Dozens at first, then more, until the skies above Earth were filled with them. The formation stretched farther than any camera could capture. An armada so vast it blotted out the stars. Coalition leaders sat frozen. In their chambers, one whispered in terror, "They hid this from us for centuries." Another muttered, "We never stood a chance." Even the warlord, watching from his stronghold, felt his blood run cold. His fleets, his empire, all seemed like insects before the rising storm. The transmission began. Every screen, every radio, every channel across the galaxy carried the voice of humanity. This time, it was not just a captain. It was the Emperor himself, the chosen voice of Earth. His image filled the skies. Calm, stern, unshaken, aliens who once mocked humans now stared at him in silence. "We gave you warnings," the Emperor said, his voice like thunder carried through the void. "We gave you chances to treat us as equals, and you refused. You called us weak. You called us children. You tried to keep us beneath you, but while you squabbled and betrayed each other, we built, we prepared. Now we rise, and you will listen." Behind him, the fleet shimmered with power. Weapon systems glowed, shields blazed, thousands of engines lit up the black. The galaxy stared at the image of Sovereign-Class Destroyers filling the void around Earth. The myths had become gods of war. The Emperor's eyes burned as he spoke again. "This is not a request. This is not a plea. This is our answer to the stars. We will no longer wait for your approval. We will no longer bow to your arrogance. From this day forward, humanity decides its own place, and you will accept it, or you will burn." The words spread across the galaxy like fire. On some worlds, crowds fell silent in fear. On others, whispers of rebellion stirred, but everywhere in every heart the truth was undeniable. Humanity had risen beyond them. The warlords snarled in fury. "Empty words! Machines cannot win a galaxy." But even his officers looked away, their eyes filled with dread. They had seen the battles. They had seen what one sovereign could do. Now they saw hundreds, and deep down, even the warlord knew his empire was. Summoned, the sovereign fleet moved, not in chaos but in perfect unity. Formations shifted like blades aligning for a strike. The void trembled as they surged forward, leaving Earth behind. They were not built to guard one world. They were built to decide the fate of all worlds. Coalition fleets scrambled to respond, but none dared fire. Every commander knew the truth. One shot against the humans would invite the wrath of an entire fleet. And no fleet, no empire, no world could withstand it. In cantinas and markets, the whispers began to change. No longer mockery, no longer doubt. Now they spoke with awe, with fear, with respect. They are not myths. They are not weak. They are the sovereigns, and they are here to rule. The Emperor's voice echoed one last time. "Remember what you have seen today. Remember the fleet that rises from Earth. Remember the name of humanity, for we are not the children you mocked. We are the answer to the stars." And with that, the fleet disappeared into the void. Hundreds of Sovereign-Class Destroyers moving as one, their shadows stretching across suns. The galaxy shivered. The myths had become real, and humanity's answer had only just begun.